Hello, this is Politicus Magnus. Today I figured I'd try something fun, which would be to peruse Twitter and the internet and see what I can find to comment on. Why not? Just a random walk through the internet. So it is the anniversary, the 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Apparently there is some news today regarding that. So one of the sons, I guess, of a woman who was killed on 9/11 wore a special T-shirt to the memorial service that was held today, I guess, at Ground Zero. And it was a really big dig on Ilhan Omar, the congressperson from, I think, Minnesota, who's said a lot of things that seem to suggest that she's a bit, let's say, not as against the terrorists as maybe she ought to be. This is her comment that said, some people did something, blah, blah, blah. And so this guy, I guess his name is Nicholas Harros Jr., wore a T-shirt that said, "Some people did something?" ? Here I'm reading via Yahoo News from the National Review. Quote him, and I guess he says, this guy Harros says, "Today I'm here to respond to you exactly who did what to whom. Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no uncertainty about that. Why your confusion?" And then he asked, "On that day, 19 Islamic terrorists, members of Al-Qaeda, killed over 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars of economic damage. Is that clear?" So that's one piece of news. I'm not sure that that was the best thing that he could do, but what are you going to do? He's got free speech. His mother died. I suppose he has every right, to redress grievances. This is a government official who's said these things. Of course, not his, but in the Congress making decisions for him regardless, and all of us. And so that's what she said. I would personally say I think it's a little bit tacky, but hey, if he's pissed off enough to go and do that, that's his right. And he certainly made the news with it and certainly pointed out some of the things that she said, maybe to more people that hadn't heard them. So it is sort of a bold protest, as it were, against certain Congress people and others saying certain things about what happened that day. So it's interesting. So I also saw that the Hong Kong protests were suspended for a day in remembrance to 9/11 by the Hong Kong protesters. They're very pro-American, and it sounds like I'm reading an article from CNBC here looking at this. The title to the article is "Hong Kong Protesters Waving U.S. Flags Appeal to Trump to Liberate Their City." Wow. So we've seen them waving U.S. flags. We've seen them singing the Star-Spangled Banner. Now they're memorializing 9/11 and pleading for the U.S. president to come and save them. I've been a bit worried about that in the sense that maybe we will. The treaty between the mainland and Hong Kong with the British, that is to say the treaty with the British, to turn over Hong Kong, specified that the government would remain separate, that the laws in Hong Kong would continue to be based on British common law and the rights of, general rights of British citizens that they've had since they were ruled by Britain. And so the Chinese government could not merge the two areas legally in the way that they've been trying to do recently, which of course they've backed off on, but I don't think anybody really believes them. We know that everybody knows that this is in their plan, that they plan to completely take over everything in Hong Kong, completely change it, make it just like their commie system, install their social credit score system. We know that that's their plan eventually. We know that they tried to do it recently. Just because they're backing off now doesn't really mean anything. To me, anyways. I don't believe them. I don't trust them. And we see what they do to their own people, literally putting millions of people in concentration camps or what they call re-education centers, tracking everybody's movements everywhere they go, not allowing them to fly, etc. If you look at the social credit score system, it is just terrifying it's the mark of the beast, basically. Like, I'm not saying that in a religious sense, I'm saying, but that's basically what it is. So, yeah, you cannot blame the Hong Kong protesters for wanting real freedom, which they have enjoyed for a long time, for the most part, and previously under British rule. You can't blame them, and they're looking to the United States now, and I think this is a really, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with our government, state, Trump, and the Chinese Communist Party. Now they're basically run by a dictator now. Their so-called president is now president for life. There's no such thing as president for life, of course. That's called being a dictator. Yeah, so he's got the same title as Castro had, president for life. I wish I was president for life. I'm joking. I kind of don't, actually. No, that'd be horrible. Even George Washington quit after his first term. He's like, forget this. So they're looking to the United States as sort of a beacon of hope, and they're using the symbolism to show that. And I think part of the symbolism is to get support from Americans just generally politically, but I don't think we should take their pleas for actual help as unserious. And I also think that we can't really stand by and let the Chinese Communist Party do whatever they want with Hong Kong either. I'm glad we haven't gotten involved directly. I'm a bit worried that if they go and push back again, for example, if they start putting Chinese military personnel in there, which they're in Shenzhen, they're massing large amounts of military forces, which is very scary. The Chinese claim, among other things, the Chinese claim Taiwan, and they've threatened 1 million times that they're going to invade Taiwan. They've said basically, we will invade Taiwan sometime in the future. They haven't done it yet, and but that's their goal. Same in Hong Kong. They already have a treaty saying that they get Hong Kong fully after, I think, 30 years, something like that. But now they're violating the treaty. So the question then becomes, is it possible, in terms of international law, that the United States potentially could come in and do something? There's been suggestions of just giving U.S. citizenship to most Hong Kong citizens, essentially, if they want it, or at least giving them free passage to the United States and the ability to potentially settle here. There's a lot of good reasons to do that. I think that, at the minimum, I think we should look at something like that, allowing them to come here. We did the same thing after Vietnam ended. There was an entire tribe, an entire group of people from Laos that were aiding the secret CIA war in Laos against the Viet Cong. And the NVA coming through the secondary Ho Chi Minh. There were two. Once we closed down the Ho Chi Minh, pretty much they went into Laos, and there was the secret war there. And so these people called the Hmong people, starts with an H, Hmong. Basically, it was a tribe that lived up on these mountains. They were sort of a mountain people. And they were pretty much all moved to the United States. First they went to California, and then California basically rejected them. And then so they were moved to Wisconsin by people affiliated with the John Birch Society. Anti-communist John Birch Society people did that back in the mid-'70s or so, when the Vietnam War ended. So this is not without precedent. We've done this a bunch of times with regard to wars and things. So I think that's a good idea. And then let's say the Chinese were going to basically invade Hong Kong. Again, I believe, from what I see, that they've already broke the treaty just by trying to do the extradition, just by trying to impose Chinese laws on Hong Kong citizens. So, and it's sort of a question in terms of international law, but to me, it looks like the treaty has already been broken by this Chinese Communist Party. Does that give us the ability? Can the British just say, hey, you broke the treaty, we're going to take it back over? How would that fly diplomatically? I'm not sure what the Chinese could really actually do unless they do want to get into a war over Hong Kong, like a real shooting war. I don't think anybody really does. That's kind of like World War III type scenario. But on the other hand, there are potentially things that we could do for the people of Hong Kong. And one of them could be, again, like I said, just abandoning it and letting the people who want to be free come here. I don't see why not. Here's another random article I see on the subject, not to go too long on one subject. It is a random walk, so I need to change subjects, I think, pretty soon. But this one just caught my eye, and so it's from the New York Post, and it says, Chinese state newspaper claims Hong Kong protesters planning terror attack. So it goes into how they called off protests during 9/11. Like I said, but the Chinese-run media outlet claimed the protesters were preparing to launch a massive terror attack. Quote, anti-government fanatics are planning massive terror attacks, including blowing up gas pipes in Hong Kong on September 11th, said the China Daily, which is owned by the Communist Party of China, I guess on its Facebook page. Quote, the 9/11 terror plot also encourages indiscriminate attacks on non-native speakers of Cantonese and starting mountain fires. So this is pretty clearly propaganda aimed at making non-native Hong Kong people, I guess, that speak Cantonese as their target audience, afraid of the quote-unquote anti-government fanatics who are protesting for democracy for everybody. So it's interesting to see what the Chinese communists are saying, and it's obviously just patently ridiculous. There's been no indication whatsoever of any sort of terroristic violence even being remotely considered from what I've seen by the protesters. So it's just patently ridiculous. So what else do we have going on here? Oh, there's this whole vaping's going to kill you thing going on. And I guess Trump's weighing in saying he wants to ban flavors of vaping cartridges or whatever, which is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. We've seen Trump do similar things, banning bump stocks, which is kind of pointless and stupid anyway. You know, talking about violent video games and things like that, which has also been proved to be bullshit. And now we're gonna go after vaping cartridges. From what I understand, a bunch of people have died. It's over 10, I think, in multiple states. From what I understand, it sounds like fake cartridges, probably cannabis, supposedly. From what I heard from one of the sources where they said that they'd actually done tests and studies to try to figure it out, something about vitamin E being put into these things as fakes. So we're not even talking about actual branded, legal made vape, whether it's cannabis-based or nicotine or CBD oil or whatever, hemp-based oils or whatever that's in them. I don't know that much about them, but, it sounded like they were putting vitamin E. You can get those vitamin E pills in the store, and they have vitamin E oil. They have vitamin E oil in them. It sounds like somebody has been putting that stuff in there. And vitamin E it's a vitamin that you need to get in your diet, I think. I don't think your body makes it. But it's also pretty toxic at high doses. And so I guess if you smoke it, it messes up your lungs, and then that can kill you. Not good. So what I think what's going to happen there really is that the FDA is going to come in like they did with everything else. This reminds me of the Tylenol murders. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's doing it on purpose. I have a strong suspicion, actually, that there was a patent on those plastic covers that seal the pill bottles. Somebody had patented that. And then all of a sudden, people started dying by taking Tylenol pills, I guess, and somebody had been putting cyanide pills in there. And very quickly after that, the FDA made it so that all these companies had to seal their bottles, and that's what that seal is. Well, that was a patent, and my suspicion would be somebody who had stake in that intellectual property might have been behind it. I get a similar feeling with the vape cartridges, potentially, but people are stupid, and you're talking about stuff that's like drugs that get you high, like marijuana, vapes, or whatever. Clearly, yeah, people are going to counterfeit, black market kind of stuff. So I think that's what's going on. Hopefully it's not, trying to get the FDA involved, but the FDA is going to get involved. And I think what's going to happen is those things are basically going to have the same rules. They're going to have to be in a sealed container of some kind that you can tell if the seal's busted. And that's basically what they did with other drugs. Probably a good thing. It probably should be like that. The packaging it's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt the companies that much that are making this stuff legally. They just have to package it differently, maybe slightly more expensive, but it's not going to be much compared, I think. But yeah, this is another case where we see Trump is not really a libertarian. His inclination apparently is to ban things, at least not plastic straws. But I think that the vapes are pretty innocuous. I've got some background in biology and stuff and whatnot, of course. And I just can't see how the actual ingredients in the real ones could cause that. I think that it's pretty much counterfeits that's causing it. And I think the solution is, I don't think that they're going to ban flavors and blah, blah, blah. They've talked about that for a long time, and it's just a dumb idea. It's got nothing to do with kids and stuff. Oh, it's flavored. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. So are cigarettes, I just think that what's actually going to happen is that the FDA is going to come in and have them seal the containers like everything else, like every other drug. So what else do we have? Oh, it looks like the Brexit has run into another snag. I've been following the Brexit thing because it's really interesting. It also impacts our politics, I think, because the Trump administration is offering the Brits special trade agreements once they're done with Brexit. So I'm reading here that a court in Scotland has overturned the previous ruling in Scotland about the proroguing. It's a nice English word. There we go. Proroguing of Parliament, the suspension of Parliament for, I guess, 5 weeks to make sure that they can't mess with getting out of the Brexit. Of course, there was that basically a coup by the Remainers against both the will of the people and, at least for 21 Tories, their own party. And, of course, they got kicked out of the party. The Scottish court, that I guess was an appeals court, has overturned the lower court, said that that was fine. Of course, it was signed off by the Queen. This court in Scotland has basically just ruled that the Queen has been involved and signed off on something that is illegal. I don't think anyone expects that ruling to stand up. And so apparently it's going to the Supreme Court in Britain on Tuesday. So, is the Queen a criminal? I guess we'll find out from the British Supreme Court. Like I said, I highly doubt that they're going to find the proroguing illegal. I'd be very surprised otherwise. So I see in big international news, and this is kind of a scary thing, actually, in my opinion. Apparently, Netanyahu's saying in Israel that if he wins re-election, which he seems to always win re-election, that he will start an annexation of the West Bank in the Jordan Valley. This is a huge deal. I would not support this. I don't think that's a good idea. I sort of understand a lot of what the Israelis and Netanyahu, to some degree at least, I understand why they're very protective and also somewhat offensive. I understand that to a degree. But on the other hand, this is quite offensive in a sense. Well, it's quite offensive to take the land. Technically, they own the land already in terms of winning it in the war. Same with the Golan Heights. They just did that with the Golan Heights, declaring them to be sovereign Israeli territory, essentially, not just controlled territory. I kind of understood the Golan. It took them a lot to capture it in the war. They need it for strategic reasons in terms of hostility from Syria, which is always a possibility. Even with Bashar al-Assad, he hasn't really had any serious incursions. He gets close, but who knows who could come into power in Syria anyway either. So the defensive aspect of the Golan made a lot of sense, and I can sort of understand that. But in terms of the Jordan Valley and the West Bank and stuff like they're talking now, I don't see the strategic necessity. I don't see anything like that. And what I do see, though, is essentially just a land grab. The strategic value is not even remotely close to the Golan. The argument from strategic value in that sense militarily sort of doesn't make any sense because the Israeli military is capable of going in there and taking it pretty much any time they want to. Anyway, if there was a necessity at the time, like in a war, that would not be an invasion per se or an annexation, and I would imagine they'd be expected to leave after that strategic position was no longer necessary in such a war. which hopefully never happens again. So with the Golan, I could understand the strategic value, the potential need. With this is just a land grab, and all it can really do, in my opinion, is to make the situation in that region a million times worse. This is going to be used as an excuse for jihadists, and it doesn't even matter now because he's already said it. And once it's said, there's really no going back from that. The genie's out of the bottle, Pandora's out of the box. And really, Pandora's out of the box, just saying that. And just the prime minister saying that in Israel. This could be really bad. And, Bibi Netanyahu, he's pushed pretty far before. This is beyond the realm of sanity, beyond, I guess, the realm of reality, because what's going to happen just by saying that now is not going to be good for sure. I also kind of doubt that it would actually happen, and I would be very, very, very surprised if the Trump administration actually does back this. I kind of expect that they would hopefully say, hey, going a little bit far. Oh, you're just going to take some more land over here, and it's not the Golan. The Golan's not very big. It's just the heights, essentially, which is strategic. But, the response, the international response is already clear. Everybody's really mad about it, but that's not abnormal with Israel. Lots of these countries hate Israel, and I think for many of them we know why. Because they hate Jews. Sad to say which countries those are. I won't say them, at least not on YouTube. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, this is not a really great move, in my opinion. So, on a lighter note, which doesn't potentially involve the Battle of Armageddon and the end times. And so what would a random walk through the news be without crazy lunatic progressives in California redefining things and destroying entire economies? That wouldn't be any fun at all. A bill known as AB 5 has passed the Senate in California and is apparently expected to be signed by Governor Newsom. So a lot of the media is hyping up this bill. It's a great win for workers and all of these things. So the bill supposedly changes the law in such a way that employers cannot, quote unquote, misclassify their workers as independent contractors. Well, independent contractor has a legal definition, and you would think, okay, that's great. So they can't misclassify them and deprive them of this and that, which they deserve under the classification under law. You'd be wrong. You'd be totally wrong. What this law is going to do is to change the classification standard for independent contractors such that, for example, Uber and Lyft drivers will no longer be counted as independent contractors, which they are. So this law clearly doesn't stop misclassification. It has changed the law so that even an Uber driver is now your employee. And that means the law is basically that there's no such thing as an independent contractor, pretty much. I don't think this is going to go very well for their economy. The gig economy only works because it's independently contracted. It would never work. Uber and Lyft, this is another example of them essentially eating themselves. Uber and Lyft are huge in California. And look what they're going to do to them. They're going to destroy them. That's completely insane. These people are idiots. Complete lunatic communist idiots. The great thing, though, is that California is a wonderful place to see the fruits of their philosophies in action. And it's going to be really fun to see this experiment play out and watch California destroy Uber and Lyft. Have a good day, guys. Never forget. Thanks.